Welcome to a Community Partners interview where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Sean Pickard, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Kelly Greenland, the director for Tourette Canada. Tourette Canada is a nationally registered, volunteer based charitable organization. They are dedicated to improving the lives of Canadians affected by Tourette syndrome and its associated conditions. With support from their nationwide of individual volunteers, community, and national councils, Tourette Canada provides impactful programs, services, and support. One of their primary goals is to create greater understanding of Tourette syndrome through education and advocacy. Thank you for joining us today, Kelly. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So it's good to have you here, learn a little bit more about Tourette syndrome. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit more about yourself. What is the Kelly Greenland experience and what inspired you to work for Tourette Canada?
Sure, happy to do that. So again, my name is Kelly Greenland, and I am the mother of a newly turned 14-year-old boy who was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome about 4 years ago now. And personally, we are based in Nova Scotia, so we're on the East Coast. And navigating through the education system primarily and the healthcare system here, we kind of discovered that Tourette syndrome is still something that is misunderstood, not quite. It doesn't quite have that level of understanding that it requires. So what I decided was I was going to be a voice for not only my son, but those in Canada, particularly the East Coast, those dealing with Tourette syndrome. So that's my journey. I joined Tourette Canada in just this past January. So I'm still fairly new to the organization, and I'm just one of 13 directors on the board of Tourette Canada.
That is a very small board for the entire nation, and a very personal journey for you. Now, some of the things that you mentioned there, Kelly, in regards to Tourette's being misunderstood or not well known, let's talk about that. What are some of the different myths about Tourette syndrome?
Oddly enough, Tourette's syndrome had its first real kind of discovery or diagnosis back in 1885. So it's not a new diagnosis by any stretch of the imagination. But I think over the centuries, I guess, with other diagnoses and neurological disorders, it kind of got lost in with its symptoms kind of sometimes mirroring a lot of other disorders as well. So we all know the Tourette syndrome as it's presented in mainstream media. It's a little bit of the joke, neurological disorder. And the truth is, that's one of the very big myths, is that this is the swearing disorder. If you don't swear, it's not Tourette's. Now, this isn't to take away from the fact that where the swearing tic, which is actually called coprolalia, does afflict a certain portion of those with Tourette syndrome, and actually is quite disabling in terms of the social stigma attached to that. So it doesn't take away the seriousness of that, but it is not quite as common as mainstream media would make it out to be. There's really about a 10% of the Tourette population that are afflicted with coprolalia. So it's not rare, but it is not as common as most people would expect. The other myth is that it's a behavioral disorder. It is not a behavioral disorder. It is a neurological disorder. The words, actions, motions, sounds that are associated with Tourette syndrome are not choices that the people make. They are part of the brain's kind of misfiring that come out as the things that we refer to as tics. Another myth, that tics are always visible. You can tell when someone's ticking. A personal story on that one. My son played baseball, and I pointed out a tic to someone, one of my fellow baseball moms, and it had started, the conversation had started with, I never see him tick. And I pointed out, I was like, that's a tick. And she said, I thought he was just swatting at the mosquitoes. So people with Tourette syndrome sometimes actually get very good at disguising tics or incorporating them into movements or sentences or or different parts of their daily life that make them almost indistinguishable sometimes. One of the other big myths is that they can just stop. They can hold it. If there's a tic that's inappropriate, they can just hold it. That's not the case. It's much like it's sometimes described as a sneeze or an itch, and you'll sneeze eventually, or even blinking. Sometimes you can hold your eyes open, but that blink will eventually come. I always have a physics analogy with that. The law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's just converted from one form to another. If a tick is withheld, it's coming out in some way. And that may be the tick eventually or some other way that the person is trying not to tick. The energy will be expelled. So it cannot be held. It can only be suppressed for maybe a short period of time. That's kind of the main sort of myths that us families dealing with Tourette syndrome kind of have to deal with sometimes on a daily basis.
So there's a lot of social, say, unsupported social aspects where it comes down to an individual's opinion of whether someone is suffering a tic or not, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is one of the big things we kind of deal with in the education system. Again, no fault of the actual people that we deal with, but Tourette syndrome is a very individually experienced syndrome. It's people tick in different ways, have different severities of tics, have different frequencies of tics. So I always encourage my son's teachers, friends, support staff, if they're questioning or if they're wondering about tics, to have a conversation with him because he knows Tourette syndrome and his experience with it. So the very individual nature of it is something that we really want to get out there so that you're not looking at a list of, well, that tic's not on this list, so it must not be a tic. That's not the case. A lot of things that even me as a mother I'll say, was that a tick? And yes, that was a tick. Oh, haven't seen that one before. So that's something it's very important to get out there, have a conversation with the person. They can explain to you if they want about what is a tick and what's not a tick and what they're experiencing in the moment.
And I think that's very, very important there. It's have the conversation with the individual. Yeah, very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes I'll get a email from a teacher saying, this happened today, is that a tick? And my response is always, did you ask him?
That's a good response to have, too. Now, during my research, I noticed on your website you have a couple of different programs, services, support groups, things of that nature. Can you tell us a little bit about those and what do they entail?
Sure. So we have a couple of support groups that are on the go right now. I will premise this by saying some of these programs and services were pre-COVID. And as we all know, COVID has presented a disruption in the I guess, normal businesses or the normal way of doing business.
It has definitely changed our lives.
So what we are doing on the Tourette Canada board is we're kind of trying to, and again, I step back a bit, not-for-profit organizations in general, I think, have taken a bit of a hit during this COVID, post-COVID, new economic world, new way of life or new direction of life. So we are kind of trying to working really hard at reestablishing Tourette Canada as in its national services. We've got a couple partnerships, which I can talk about a little bit later. But a couple of things that we do offer is we have a couple support groups. So right now we have one for mothers. I'm sure parent. I think for the most part it's just mothers right now, but or parents of children or youth with Tourette syndrome. Some of them actually have adult children with Tourette syndrome, and that happens. I think that's on a weekly basis. Then we have another support group for adults living with Tourette syndrome, because again, one of the myths I maybe should have mentioned was that often people grow out of Tourette syndrome, but that's not always the case. I know, generally speaking, we kind of have the rule of threes. About 30% will kind of grow out of it, quote unquote, to a point where maybe their tics are barely noticeable. A third will continue on kind of this constant path, and a third will even see an increase as they reach adulthood. So we do have a support group for adults with Tourette syndrome, and we also have a youth hangout for kids from 13 to 18. As I always view that kind of age group as almost the missing middle of there's a lot of resources out there for dealing with elementary and primary school kids in the classroom and in society and in sports and things like that. And then adults get really good at kind of self-advocating and finding the resources themselves. But that youth age group is sometimes missed, and I think that's really important for them to be able to have some social connections of someone who understands what it's like for them in the everyday world.
You absolutely need that connection throughout all those points in life, especially as you mentioned, though, the missing middle, where there's a lot going on. A lot. Now, apparently, I missed this by about a week, Kelly, but there's something called the Trek for Tourette's. Can we talk about that, please?
Yes, absolutely. So from May 15th to June 15th every year, that's our Tourette's Syndrome Awareness Month. And you'll see a real uptick on educational resources out there, social media presence on Tourette syndrome. I know a lot of municipalities will have their lighting, or some cities who have bridges will light up their bridge with teal for Tourette syndrome. And one of the big events that happens during that month is the Trek for Tourette. This year it happened on what was the date now? Sunday, which was the 25th, I believe. So that was the date that we had over 20 teams across Canada and over 100 participants take part in a 5 kilometer walk for Tourette awareness. And they got sponsors and donators to kind of donate for them to do this walk. We raised over $27,000 across the country for Tourette syndrome awareness. And that was a really, really empowering thing to take part of. It was our first year doing it. And some cities have actual locations that you would gather and walk together. But a lot of, since we're a national corporation or a national association, that you could also just do it on your own. So I think what this hopefully will do is, this year I did it on my own. We didn't have one, but I'm really hoping to bring that to my home base, my Halifax home base, and have a location where we can connect with other families that are affected by Tourette syndrome. It's a really nice way of getting outside, enjoying some nature. The kids have a great time. And so in some of the bigger cities, I know we had a big Calgary team this year who did had quite a few runners and raised quite a bit of money. So as always, we always hope to expand that and grow it. So maybe next year, just before it, will come back on and get people out there walking for us.
You know what? I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you, Kelly, in just under a year. And I want to hear how many people you got coming next year. I think that would be good. Now, let's talk a little bit about the supports and resources that Tourette Canada has to offer. Are there any restrictions to being a member of Tourette Canada to obtain these services? Is it age, family members, you have to be married, caregiver status, anything of that nature? Help us understand.
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. There are no restrictions on accessing any of the services through Tourette Canada, and through the services of one of our newest partners. I'm going to get the name right here because it's a long one, and I mix it up all the time. So Tourette Canada and the Tourette OCD Alberta Network have partnered. So any of the services offered by Tourette Canada, any of the services offered by the Tourette OCD Alberta Network are free of charge as well. So there's no cost associated with contacting us and seeing what services are available. There are webinars, which are great resources for parents who, I was going to say, are new to a diagnosis, but to tell you the truth, I use them all the time. So I'm always learning something about Tourette syndrome and the research that's happening. There are things like in services. So that's kind of on an individual basis. So we can tailor a package for what your needs may be, in terms of maybe you have a child in school and they're just not getting it. They're trying, but they're just not getting it. And we can offer a package either to be sent to them or to arm you with as the parent advocate, or we can have someone maybe in person, should the location require that or be available, we can have someone go out and do an in-service, lead a small group, take the staff of that school or a workplace or whatever it may be, and kind of do an information and awareness and offer some strategies and tips for making sure that you're creating an inclusionary environment. We also have a kind of a conference coming up in November. That's really going to be a great educational piece that's going to be held in Toronto this year. Hopefully, at some point, that'll move around the country since we are nationally based. So, but that'll be 1 day conference, and it offers free streams. So for students, those who are affected or have Tourette syndrome, there's a stream for parents and caregivers, and then there's a stream for medical professionals, because I think that's really important too, to have a good medical awareness when you're dealing with families with Tourette syndrome.
That is very, very important, having that medical understanding. But let's talk a little bit more about things like you mentioned in-services, you mentioned the conference coming up. And I know earlier we were talking about many of the educational aspects that Tourette Canada offers, but someone just joining the organization, someone with Tourette's, just stepping in for their first day, they're going to be assigned some support, some resources, someone to work with them, some educational materials, things like that. But how do you determine who gets what? Do you have your own sorting hat? What's the plan for people getting to the proper place?
It's really individually based. No one is, there's no hierarchy. So no one is treated as more deserving or more urgent than anyone else. And we really, like I said, we have 13 board members with a variety of experiences with Tourette syndrome and accessing resources. We also have volunteers beyond that, based all over the country. So what we would likely do is once an inquiry comes in, geographically, we may put them in touch with someone that can either touch base person or at least have a real good understanding of the resources that are not only just Canada based, but community based as well, whether that be literature, support systems in that area, a liaison for school systems or school boards or workplaces. Things like that. And it would really be tailored to sort of what they're looking for. Sometimes all they're looking for is, I just want to know what the latest criteria is for being diagnosed. So people may come to us pre-diagnosis and just say, hey, I have a suspicion, or I'm thinking maybe Tourette's. What should I be looking for? And then we can point them in the direction of some of the criteria that the medical professionals may look to or may ask about when you're navigating that sort of potential road. We may, if they're already in diagnosis and it's new, and they don't know how to explain it to a child's teacher, a child's principal, a sports team coach. It's sometimes can be a very invisible disability, and they just need the words. So sometimes the words can be provided to them through various resources, and sometimes we can be the words for them, should that in-service be required. So really, it is a very individual, just like being diagnosed with Tourette syndrome is a very individual and personal experience. The kind of servicing that you get from us at Tourette Canada is very individual and catered to the needs of the person reaching out.
I'm very, very happy to hear that it's tailored that much to the individual. Now, without using any names, Kelly, I'm sure you've seen a number of people come through the program. I know you mentioned you've only been around since January, but I'm sure you've seen enough people that somebody has come in and said, I need help with something. This is going on or something else is happening. Can you share a success story with me? We don't need to identify anyone, but what happened when someone came in, asked for help? What were the resources? What happened?
I'm going to, again, turn this a little bit back on myself, and I'll name myself and my son as a bit of a success story here, partly because that's the story we own. And the journey that we've been through over the last 4 years has been difficult. And bumpy. It's a like we talked about the missing middle earlier. My son just turned 14 yesterday. It's already a new time in his life. There's a lot of things going on, and what we have experienced over the last few years is just that lack of knowledge and understanding. And what I did through reaching out to Tourette Canada was, we have a gap here on the East Coast. How can I help? What can I do to make a difference for kids like mine here on the East Coast? Now, to tell you the truth, I kind of thought maybe I could run a little group here. Maybe I could get in touch with some other kids who were diagnosed as well, and kind of just manage a social aspect of it here. I didn't see joining a board for a national not for profit being on my agenda. But to tell you the truth, it has really made an impact in being heard. They have welcomed me with open arms. They have welcomed our story with open arms. And they have really armed with a passion for service to the Tourette community here in Nova Scotia, and a real passion for ensuring that our voices aren't lost or aren't masked by the presence of such a socially stigmatized disorder. So it's not just about the tics, it's about the person behind it. So the success story here is my son he trusts me. He trusts what I'm learning through Tourette Canada, the resources that I get through Tourette Canada. And he, although still 14 and reluctant at times, is much more, oh, you're affiliated or you've gone to an organization. Okay, you can come to my school and you can tell my friends and you can tell my teachers and you can talk to my friends' parents. And there's a real comfort in knowing that there's this organization that has their back. And I feel very strongly connected to an organization that offers these supports. And I think that this is only the beginning for not only the East Coast of Nova Scotia, but for Tourette Canada across the entire country.
It's great to hear that your son has that comfort. And before I forget, wish him a happy birthday for us, please. We missed it by a day. But my favorite question here, Kelly, what is the one thing you see happening over and over again to individuals with disabilities that shouldn't be? And how do we stop it?
The one thing I see over and over is that they're not always believed. The amount of questioning that my son seems to encounter when he tells people he has Tourette syndrome, or when he tells people that this is a tic, I can't help it. The first reaction seems to be, yeah, right. And whether that's from his peers or from adults. And I think that's not just Tourette syndrome based. I think for a lot of invisible disabilities, there's this question of, yeah, but really, do you need this? Or really, do you need that? How do we stop it? I think it's just making it the norm. This is normal. He sometimes, he has a little sticker on his water bottle. I don't know if he has it anymore because, junior high. But it's just, stay calm. It's just Tourette's. And he would show people that when they'd be like, what are you doing? It's like, it's just Tourette's. Get over it. Like, it's just a tic. Leave me alone, kind of thing. Like, move on. Next question. Just that. I don't know if there's a real way to get over it other than just being there with the information and being open about, yeah, actually, do you want to hear some more about it? And instead of always maybe dismissive of, because sometimes the questions come about maybe a rude way. And it's our first instinct might be like, oh, why don't you just leave me alone? Or, hey, yep. And guess what? It's not just me. There's more of us out there. Here's some information so that when you meet the next person, there might be a little bit more compassion.
Very important. Very important, that extra compassion. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time, Kelly. But I do want to make sure if someone wants to get a hold of Tourette Canada, they're looking to volunteer, they're looking to be a member, they just want information. They've got a neighbor with Tourette or something like that. How do people reach out and get a hold of you or get information from Tourette Canada?
Sure. Well, there's on our website, tourette.ca. There's a couple email addresses and phone numbers on there. But there's also myself. Each of the directors has an email address, and mine would be kelly.greenland@tourette Tourette.ca, and I'd be happy to point anyone in the right direction. We also have info@Tourette.ca. We also have social media at Tourette Canada. And any of those ways will get you in the door, and we will take it from there.
What about an old school person like me, Kelly? Is there, say, a 1-800 number?
Ooh, that's a good question. And maybe I'm not as old school as I thought I was. I think I have a number here. Just one second. Do not have a phone number on. I know there is. There we go. We have a 1-800-361-3120.
Excellent. But unfortunately, Kelly, that's all the time we have. Would you care to say goodbye to the folks at home?
Oh, thank you so much for having me and for highlighting Tourette syndrome and Tourette Canada. We really appreciate it, and happy to take any questions if you want to get in touch.
Thank you for coming out, Kelly, and sharing with everyone today. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kelly Greenland of Tourette Canada, and I'm Sean Pickard. Until next time, everybody, bye for now.